So one of the things I want to talk about today that's been like on my heart for a little while, and I mean, I think it's something that we have not talked enough about within our community this year. We've just, there's always some balls that drop, but and I think that this relates to both personally for me, and I think everyone that listens, I think it also relates very much to business. And, I mean, if you're in business, your personal views, your personal confidence, your personal self-image, your personal traumas, your personal stuff always is going to come into business, if you're operating or you're doing business. And so,
which I love, by the way.
What's that?
Which I love when your personal stuff comes in, because you get to grow and heal both personally and professionally in this industry. Yeah.
And, the one thing that I've worked on a lot, and it's constant work, I'm continuing to work on it. And the older you get, obviously you have a lot more perspective, because the older you get, the more perspective and the more situations that you have gone through, wisdom, right?
There you go.
Young, you think, oh, those guys with wisdom don't know what they're talking about. And then once you experience it and you have the wisdom, you're like, oh, nothing can replace it. And, but one of the things that I listened to a podcast from a guy that I really like. I've for 20 years, I've followed his work. You might know Sharma.
No, I don't know Sharma.
Yeah, he's really good. You'd like him. I remember one time there was a website I wanted, Your Potential, and he owned it, and that's how I caught on. He's Robin Sharma. He has a book called The Leader That Has No Title. He's really good. You'd like him. Check out his podcast.
Yeah, I will.
He has a podcast that is like 1 to 2 minutes, and it's like little just snippets. But anyway, he had one, and it just said, be a victim or be a leader, but you can't be both. And this is coming at a time in my life where I'm constantly trying to look in the mirror and saying, okay, well, how am I addressing different situations that pop up? And, but I think it's so relevant. We talk about this, and we developed a whole training around it at LCD, and talking about the drama triangle and, the victim mentality and the ability for people to go case build. And I've found this over and over and over and over again. And partly I want to talk to you today because I want to gain some perspective. And I know that you have a lot of wisdom and experience in academia knowledge around this topic. And so that's one of the reasons I want to do it. But I think it serves so many people in business and in life is because, one of the things that I've always used, and this isn't religious, I don't care what anybody's religious beliefs are. I think that as long as you're congruent to your beliefs and your faith, I respect you. But I'm going to use this old wise book called the Bible, right? And a lot of times I get personally, I have a personal trigger when people take narratives out of the Bible to serve, or they take stories out of the Bible to serve their narrative. And I call it case building. And what I'm finding today, even in the business world, is people are finding other quote unquote authorities, whether it's a book, and using this book to build a narrative, or not this book specifically, but I'm just saying, like, I have books, right? I have books. Everybody's got books. But I think in business, a lot of times people do this to let themselves off the hook, and you use the word consciousness a lot. Is my goal or hope through this would be people just, we could give them tools to make them self-check, am I being a leader through this situation, or am I being a victim? Am I reinforcing someone's narrative, or am I helping listen and maybe redirect, their thoughts? So I don't even know the question. I just kind of wanted to have a back and forth with you. We talk about it as the drama triangle, and it's so easy in today's world to fall into the drama. And with all the protests that are going on around the very sensitive situation, some people are using that to reinforce that they've been a victim, right? There's other people that are using it as an opportunity to, be the victor or the rescuer, or those would be the three roles in the drama triangle. But love to hear just thoughts on, how you've seen what, Sharma would say, the truth in, do you believe that you can be a victim and be a leader or be a winner? Or
Well, I think there are two opposing points of view, and I think a lot of times is being the victim allows people the excuse not to lead. It gives people permission to follow an old narrative, an old story, an old set of beliefs that allow them to hide, allow them to not have to show up, not have to commit. Um, you know, the question I think that for a lot of people that I find that I see kind of on a daily basis is the in many ways the lack of willingness or desire to see themselves as the common denominator in a lot of the insanity and a lot of the drama that's created in and around their lives, seeing themselves as being in any way somehow responsible. And the interesting thing about drama, we were talking about it before, is that sometimes drama, people get drawn in. They don't necessarily, their intention is not to get drawn in, but sometimes the drama of somebody sharing a story can be an opening for relatability. Yeah, I know how you feel. I remember when this happened to me. And then it kind of just, what happens is it takes on a life of its own. It starts to spiral. So I think the person who really wants to lead, who really wants to transcend the challenges that they've had in the past and be able to say, here's where we are, here's where we're going, or here's where I'm going, and I'd like you to go with me, are people who can create the relatability in the moment. Yes, I understand how that must feel. I was in a similar situation when I was at such and such, and I totally get it. And here's how I felt at the time, and here's what I experienced. And here's what I learned as a result of that I've learned to apply here, and I want to encourage you to do that. So, we talk about it as LCD, is the turn, right? Is to create empathy, to create an opportunity for relatability, because that's critical to everything. I want to know that you're like me, and we've gone through the same things. And then also encouraging somebody to lift themselves out of that story, because it's very addictive. It's very, and so much of it, from what I've studied, is chemical based. You and I are both, really enjoyed listening to Dr. Joe, right? And he talks about the chemical addiction, the amount of chemicals that get dropped into the body when we start to go down a path and down a spiral, and it becomes where the body literally becomes addicted to that. And so it's an interesting dynamic where people can kind of fall into that. But I think it really comes down to, from a place of, conscious leadership, if that's what someone desires, is the ability to create empathy and relatability, and here's a way out, or here's what I've learned. And I think, it's less about, we have a tendency in society to diagnose people. We have a tendency in society to label people.
mm,
And if we can kind of, I believe, is if we can move away from that and lift people up to double down, triple down on what they're good at, by giving them a piece of wisdom, by giving them a suggestion, by encouraging them to take a different level of action, that movement often can displace and break apart the old story that somebody's running around the drama of why this always seems to happen to me. Do you relate to that at all?
no, for sure. When you're talking, it spurs inspiration in my head, or things that I'm feeling, both consciously and unconsciously. But you said a couple things that I think is important when you said chemical addiction when spiraling out of control. And it brought me to, like, one of the human needs that I think everyone has a need to fulfill, and that is the need for significance. And sometimes when you spiral things out of control, and you can get people to reinforce or to support you through different stories, and I would call that case building. Sometimes it lights up that significance and makes you feel more significant where you might not have felt significant. And that's the thing that I think, when you were just saying that, that's what I was relating to. And you said we have a tendency, and I think everyone does, like, of judging, which I would say is labeling or diagnosing, right? It's like, who are we? How self-righteous is someone to diagnose someone else as a narcissist? Like, who are we to do that, right? Or how self-righteous are we to diagnose someone as a loser, or diagnose someone as um, I don't know. Give me a word. I can't even think of a word. Uh,
Well, it's labeling in any capacity creates the limitation and also contributes to the story and the belief, the old belief. Well, the reason you're like this is because of this. You're this or you're that, or I see it all the time, and I've seen it in medical diagnosis where I've had clients who would come to me and we'd be working about here's where we are and how do we move forward, and then they'd start seeing someone else, or they'd start seeing a psychiatrist, and they start getting these labels, right? And then all of a sudden the labels become, well, the reason I'm like this is because I'm this. And I'm like, okay, how about here's where we are and here's where we're going? Like the labels are only going to hold you in a place and help to fortify old beliefs, old thoughts, old ideas, old experiences. Well, it's like the guy who gives a guy $100 and he says, look, you in the past you've been challenged around spending money. I'm going to give you $100 and I'm going to see you in 2 weeks. I want you to give me the same $100 back. And he sees the guy in 2 weeks and he says, where's the $100? He goes, well, I told you I have an issue with money, like, so people start to rely on those stories, and all those stories do, and all of those experiences, all that creates is for people is more of the same, which is a safety factor for many people to just create status quo. And I think what one of the things that inspires me so much about Prove It and what we get to do with LCD and other things and the messages as a company is to help people highlight that the challenges that you're experiencing, like how you do Prove It is how you do your life, and how you do your life is how you do Prove It. So if you're willing to take a deeper look at that from a place of ownership and not blame, and blame goes, others and yourself, because when you point the finger at someone else, there's always three fingers pointing back at you, right? So it's getting out of blame completely and getting into ownership and going, oh, being the observer, being your best observer. Oh, I'm noticing. That's interesting, Mitch. I am noticing that I do this, and this in these types of situations. Great. So what do you want to do with it? Because if we keep doing this, we're going to keep getting this. But if we're willing to do something different, we can only win. We already know that the default is status quo. We already know that it's going to be status quo. It's going to probably include some sabotage. It's going to include some messiness, and it's going to be very familiar to you. We already know that. So can we suspend our old beliefs to create some new beliefs and just move forward in a way that we get to show up differently, because we're stepping into the unknown and doing things that we've never done before to get something we've never gotten before? That, to me, is that
and
growth
that takes
pattern I think we get
courage.
to
Like,
create.
let's not make any mistake about it. I mean,
Yeah.
human nature, we want to stay with something that's familiar, no matter how even destructive it is to our own lives.
Yep.
If it's familiar to us, it's comfortable, or that's what you meant by status quo. But
Yep.
it takes courage to shift. It takes courage to do something that you haven't done before. It takes courage to try on or give something a different meaning than you've given it before.
Well, and what I like to point out to people is, listen, you've created mastery. And they're like, well, what do you mean? My life sucks, or this is horrible. I keep doing the same thing. I said, no, it's mastery. Mastery works in both directions. You've mastered creating this status quo, this familiarity. You've mastered it. Congratulate yourself. What it tells you, that if you think a certain way and feel a certain way and take a certain level of action, you're going to create the result that you set out to create. And you set out to create, I'm not good enough, I'm not talented enough, I'm not smart enough. You did it. Congratulations. Like, people get Academy Awards for that. I wish I could give you one, and I have done it, right, at Prove It events where I've given out the little Academy Awards. So you've already proven that you've created mastery in that area. Can we shift the way we think? Can we shift the way we believe, just as an experiment? Can we shift the way we think? Can we shift the way we believe? Can we take some action we've never taken before and see if we can't create mastery in a place that actually does serve where it is that you say you want to go. Do it as an experiment. You've already mastered the other, right?
So what would you say, for this, let's call it a spiral or falling into this drama triangle? What are some signs where people can actually, create a technique to stop themselves once they become aware? Like, what are maybe some languages? What are some behaviors? What are that someone could self-identify?
Well, what I like to do is I always recommend people don't do this in public because you'll get arrested or you'll get committed. But I will literally, when I'm by myself and I realize that my brain is starting to run stories, I will literally look at myself if I'm sitting next to myself and I'll literally go, so that's the story you want to go with? Like I literally take myself out of identifying myself as my thoughts and myself as my feelings. And I just take a moment and just observe it. Other times I realize that I'm like, to be, use an example. The other night, Wendy and I were watching the debate and there was a pause in a moment and I just kind of like took a moment to check in with myself and I realized I was incredibly anxious. And anxious for me, I feel it in my chest, I feel it in my arms, and I realized that I'm shallow breathing. So I got up and I walked away. So having the awareness that when you're in an uncomfortable situation to just pause for a second, take a deep breath, and it is what's happening now happening inside of me more chemical related that's creating an uneasiness that is no longer serving me, that I don't want to be a part of, right? And then removing myself from it. The other thing I do is in the morning when I'm meditating is focusing on because this I think is the biggest challenge that most people face, and they don't necessarily maybe identify it in the words I'm about to use. And it's true, I believe, which is, people say, well, what's your biggest challenge every day? And I say, well, my biggest challenge every day is staying in my loving. It's my biggest challenge. So I know that what I have to do
That's why you got a
is,
dog. That's why you got a puppy.
that's why I got a puppy that wakes me up at 3:00 in the morning to go to the bathroom. But like, it's important, I think, for us to like stay grounded and stay present. So whether it's meditation, whether it's gratitude, whether it's checking in on your breathing at different points in the time. I set reminders on my phone to go off. What are you thinking right now? What are you feeling right now? Are you breathing right now? All of that stuff, because I think it's important, because we're going to get triggered throughout the day. So if I know that I'm going to get triggered throughout the day, I know that it's going to happen. I know that my kids are going to do something. They're going to say something. They're going to do something that doesn't make any sense in any solar system in the universe. And I have to like check in. I have to check in. So to me, it's the challenge to stay in my loving. And I learned this a long time ago because I heard an interview one time with a Tibetan monk who was held prisoner by the Chinese for many years, and he was tortured for years and years and years, and finally freed. And they said, did you lose anything in the experience of being in prison like that? And he said, and I thought it was so fascinating, he said, I almost lost compassion for my captors. So I think in this time, when we're looking to run a business, when we're trying to figure out like how to do it within the confines of a pandemic and a political climate that's uncertain and uneasy and a world climate that's up in the air, that I think it's important that for each of us that we find ways during the course of the day to check in and to stay in our loving so that we can make clearer sound and more sound decisions about things. So we're making decisions based on energy that's more logical than emotional. Because I've never made, a really smart decision when I'm charged,
Well, no,
when I'm triggered.
So yeah, you've made the comment before, which I thought was a great conversation, that I am right now replaying in my mind a lot, just to check in with myself, right? And that is, if you go looking for logic, when someone's operating out of
Emotion.
emotion, or someone's operating out of self-righteousness, or I think you said self-righteousness. If someone's operating out of righteousness, don't go looking for logic because you won't find it. Don't go looking for someone rational if they're operating out of righteousness. And even I think like moral authority, I'm seeing that more and more, especially through the climate that we're in, that,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of like the person that says I'm loyal the most, usually is the first person to leave, to leave like a fight, right? Like, oh, I'm loyal. Business partner told me that a long time ago. Be careful of the ones that try to convince you how loyal they are, or
Well, it always starts with, well, you know me.
yeah, or the
Blank.
you know, the one that talks about it's like the pointing of the finger, right? The one that's usually accusing the
Projection.
most is
Yeah.
projecting the most, you know. So the
Yep.
one that's saying that
There's a
um,
Shakespeare quote that's from, I think it's from Hamlet, that says, "He who doth protest too much."
no, but explain what that means. I mean, I know what it means to me, you know, because it has me second guess myself. Okay, am I doing this because of am I making this decision because of how I feel about it, or I'm making the decision because it's a smart decision, right?
Well,
Or
here's language that you would understand. The best defense is a strong offense, right? The best way to deny what it is that you're being accused of is to accuse other people of it. That's how it works. That's how people get out of taking ownership and get out of taking responsibility. They
right,
make it about, they literally flip it. They literally project their stuff onto other people. And listen, sometimes I'm aware that even in the cleanest possible place that I may be doing it. And I'll say to somebody that I'm talking to, say, listen, I may be projecting here, and here's what's coming forward for me, because I may be on some
and
level.
I'll be honest. You know, I will be honest right now. I'm not going to say I'm always going to be honest, but right now I'm going to
But
be
this
honest.
way, hold on, and we're recording this part, right? Okay.
Yes, we are recording. Is I've noticed that a lot about you when you're talking with me, your projection, just like on age and physicality and stuff. You're talking about me. Is that what you're talking about? Like that's really you project?
No, I know I'm heading you off at the pass because I know it's coming. So let me get it in now.
That's right. Oh, it's to kill or to be killed with us, right? It's
That's
like,
it. That's it.
hey, um, all right, what else do we want to talk? I want to get a keto up. Hold on. So one of the things that I
Practice.
think is important is how does all this stuff, some people, they might not have a level of awareness or they might not have connection with some of this language, but what does all this mean to someone that's trying to move forward in business? Forget about life for a second, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think that one's going to mirror the other, I think. But
Well, I don't know. People used to say to me, when I say I work with people on this level, they say personally and professionally, I say, what's the difference? I don't see a difference. The one difference I do see is what people perceive is at stake. That's the difference.
so I'll tell you, I think this is important too. This is something I just recorded yesterday for a podcast and something that
Yeah.
I'm inspired to do. But the importance of peer group, choosing the right partners and team, especially when it comes to both personal and business counsel. I think a lot of people seek counsel, but they don't really know the outcome of what they're seeking counsel for. And sometimes subconsciously they're looking for reinforcement. So they go to the person, that's kind of what we're saying, reinforce their story or case build. And then I had a talk last weekend with a group in Orlando, Florida. One of them was asking someone to be their mentor. And I said, well, why do you want them to be your mentor? And they really didn't know. Their perception was this person had what they wanted. And I said, but that person doesn't have the success in this business. They wanted them to mentor them in the business. And I said, there's a big difference when you seek counsel from a business perspective. Anyone can coach you or give you perspective based on their experience, but I use the difference, and there's a difference in a coach and a mentor. Anyone can
Yes.
be a coach as long as they know your outcomes. But for me, now this is my definition, a mentor is someone that has walked through the minefield that I'm going through, so they can help me avoid some of the pitfalls, right? But I think that even at a deeper level, it's the power of peer group. It's who you're listening to, who's the echoes in your ear, who's the voices, and what are you seeking from that counsel? And as I grow older, the more and more I realize this has had an impact on my life since I was little, all the way through, even from times where I was toxic, from times that I was, operating 100% out of ego and I reflect back to those times, I look at the people that I was listening to the most. So I don't know what your thoughts are, the importance of choosing the right partners, team, especially when it comes to both personal counsel and business counsel.
Well, I think you hit it. It's like, well, what are the outcomes? Like I'm not going to, like I have somebody that I know who's a relationship, calls himself a relationship expert, hasn't been in a relationship in 15 years.
That's why they're an expert.
So I go, well, you could be a single expert, or you could take the position of, I haven't been in a relationship for 15 years, and here's what I'm learning about myself. That would be valuable for somebody. There's no value there from my perspective of how you're going. I wouldn't take financial advice from somebody who's never had two nickels to rub together and doesn't know anything about it. You want to seek that kind of, you want to look for people who have accomplished what you want to accomplish, and hopefully in a way that you also want to accomplish it. Not that you can't learn from somebody who, might be different than you. There's always something for us to learn.
And sometimes those learning lessons are even stronger, right? Of learning what not to do, or how you not want to be, because you see the polarity. Like when you're around someone that's evil, and then you get around someone, there is polarity in the world, I think.
Yeah, well, and I find it's really fascinating because what I've noticed over the past 20 years is how many times I've asked somebody what they want, and then they tell me what they don't want, and I have to interrupt them.
Interesting.
I said, well, I didn't ask you what you don't want, because what you're doing is you're leading with what you're afraid of.
And that's and we all are afraid of something, no matter how macho we are, unless we just don't, what do they call it?
Unless you're able to move back and forth between the masculine and the feminine.
Who, me? No, but I'm serious. Like,
no,
but
that's
real. Like it's not real, but it's a real thought. But it's a thought that you can change. However, everyone has fears, I think.
Well, I always say that the way I've learned to navigate it, and this little Mitchism came to me when I was facilitating a ropes course training, and watching people, knowing that they were strapped in, knowing that they were harnessed in, knowing that the wire that they were standing on could hold a Buick, knowing that if they fall, they would fall an inch before somebody would be able to catch them. And then the brain thinking, no, I'm going to die. And I think this is the thing that I've learned is being able to distinguish between the fear that protects you and the fear that prevents you. Because it's often we're not able to do that. So you could say, hey, Mitch, or you could say to somebody who, let's say, somebody who's behind the scenes, who likes to be behind the scenes, say, hey, listen, do me a favor, go on stage in front of the 1,500, 2,000 people in the audience and just talk for 5 minutes about this. Would you do that? Because I just got to run and go to the bathroom real quick, right? And they're like,
I've done that to you before.
Yes, but I'm not afraid of that. You did do that. So, but that person in their mind can go to a place where the chemicals that get released, the breathing that takes place, the anxiety that takes over their body can feel like death, like actual death, even though they wouldn't die by standing on a stage. But their body and their brain can't tell the difference between the two. To them, that it's as real as if they stepped off the side of a curb in front of a bus. So the more we can differentiate between the fear that protects us and the fear that prevents us, the more we can start addressing ways in which we can step into, because it's always the things that prevent us are the things that ultimately will shift our business. The things that are people most afraid of in the business are the things that they really need to do. And I love when people catch themselves and they go, I'm really afraid to do this, and I know this is exactly what I have to do. Like, that's cool to me when I hear somebody say that. I think that's powerful.
Yeah, and I don't know the book it came from or the excerpt, but it's it's a replay in my brain when I hear things like this. And it's like, every day do something that you're scared to do. Like every day make that a point that's an exercise or that's a goal. Challenge yourself to do one thing you're scared of. Which is kind of what you're saying. It's building a muscle of being courageous and just operating out of unconsciousness and the fact that, you're growing through that process, right? Like, and it might have been like, I don't know if it was like a Max Lucado book or a John Maxwell book, but I remember it
Hmm.
vividly.
Well, and I learned this a long time ago with a coach of mine where, and you'll hear this a lot. I hear this a lot from proven promoters all the time. They go, well, it just doesn't feel like it's me. It just doesn't feel right. And I'm like, well, you say that often, and let's separate it out and say, well, what if you didn't start with how something would make me feel, and you started with the outcome, if you actually did it, what your life would look like or how it could be different. So then you go to the end in mind, and you get somebody gets excited about, well, if I did that, then I'd be able to this, and I'd be able to go here, and I'd be able to buy this, and I'd be able to experience this. And they start to get excited. I said, okay, start with that. Start with the outcome in mind, and then create a new feeling around the experience as a result. But a lot of people shortchange themselves as a promoter when they go, yeah, that just doesn't feel like me. It doesn't feel good. And they trap themselves because they're learning, and this is the balance. They're learning how to be okay with their feelings, but now they're also leading with their feelings all the time, and that can become a trap. So
Right.
starting with the outcome of what you can achieve, what you can experience as a result of taking the action. And I did it. I actually took a job that didn't feel right to me because the outcome provided me a lot and afforded me a lot of things that I really did want in my life. And so I took it, didn't know anything about it. I was in an industry where I had no clue whatsoever, and ended up exceeding my own expectations in the field and those of the people I work with because I didn't have the experience. I actually doubled down on what I did know. And while people who had the experience were getting fired, I was getting promoted because I just came at it from a different place. And then every time I would get caught up in the anxiety of it, because it'll happen from time to time, it's okay, is I would go back, why did I do this? Why did I take this job? What's the outcome? What has it afforded me to do? What are the experiences that I'm now able to have as a result of doing it, and kind of moving myself out of that feeling place so that I can actually realize in the achievement of it, what else and how else it benefits me in my life. And I think part of our goal, I think, as within leadership at Prove It, is to help people and support people in seeing that, and then helping create a path for them to be able to transcend that. And that becomes the growth.
So what's in closing, what is and I appreciate your time. I know that we've been on for like an hour, but what's one thing that you're right now moving towards that scares you to grow through?
Ooh. I think it's I would say it's the commitment that I'm making to that next level of growth as a leader, and creating, in doing the podcast that I'm doing, in doing all of the writing that I'm doing. Like, I have all the content, but it's like, now that there is a team behind me, like it's like in play. It's like, that to me is a challenge to me every day, because there is an added level of responsibility of showing up and of delivering and being consistent that I'm excited about. And I'm aware that sometimes when I get up in the morning, I have some anxiety around it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you've learned just through working with people through Prove It in the last 4 years?
The magic is found in the unknown. And the more I'm willing to step in the unknown, and the more I see other people step in the unknown, like, every single person I ever talked to has the capability and has the capacity to go wherever they want to go. And if they can just be willing to tap into the unknown, like, be more comfortable with, because the known is only going to create what it's always created.
Right.
So the tapping into the unknown is where people discover the magic, and I watch people light up when they get there.
So what is one obstacle that you see as a consistent obstacle that um, that lead to self-sabotage or quitting or stopping from someone accomplishing what they set out to accomplish?
Um, the overall belief that if I do this, then I'll get this.
So the belief that something is actually fixed. It's not a fixed equation.
If I talk to this many people a day and I plug people in and I listen in on the calls and I do all the stuff, then my business is going to grow.
Right.
And it's kind of like, it's almost like you're going, well, I'm just going to, it's like a cause and effect. If I do this, then I'll get this. And you may get this. And it may take you longer to get this. I don't know what your timing is around this. And then if you get frustrated because you're doing everything that everybody said and then your energy sucks, people are going to notice that your energy sucks.
I have,
Or
yeah,
if you're,
that's a big one for me. I mean, like lately I haven't been on a lot of calls because I know my energy isn't right. And I don't want that to affect them. I can say the words, but if I'm not connected with the words that I'm saying, this is just my brain. However, when I do talk, like then I feel better, which is kind of an ironic hyperbole, right? So it's like you're speaking it into, you're reminding yourself and you're shifting your brain chemistry while you're doing it, because you're getting rid of, as Dr. Amen would say, the ants, the automatic negative thoughts that come in.
well,
But I
and
think what you're saying is there's no, it's not a static equation. There's nothing static.
not.
Yeah.
Listen, you understand this. Like there's the, I don't know if it's called goal line, goalposts, something where goalposts, is that what it is?
Yeah.
Where you see these like overcoming to become stories and they're, crazy stories and they're highly charged and the music is playing and you see these and they're inspirational and they're motivational and they're great. That's no question about it. But the truth of the matter is, and this, from playing competitive sports, for every, for the Kobe Bryant who stayed, hours after practice and shot 1,000 free throws when everybody went out for a beer or went home or did whatever, right? There are hundreds of thousands of other people who went out and did the same thing that didn't make the big leagues, that didn't get there. So is it possible the overcome to become? Absolutely. Is it a guarantee? No, it's not. And I think that's where people, well, I was told if I do this and I do this, then I'll get this. And that's where there's that lack, as I referenced earlier, that's where there's a lack of magic. That's where there's a lack of wanting to do something different. There's a lack of wanting to believe that it's possible that you can achieve this by doing something you've never done before in a way that you've never done it. And I think that is what I would say I come up against, and it's presented to me daily, weekly, monthly over the past 5 years of, people caught up in that trap, and they're not realizing that the magic is in the unknown and there is magic inside of them. But they have to get out of the structure of, if I do this, then I'll get this. We don't know. And we don't, like I said, and we also don't know when, because everybody's timing is going to be different. There's things that all of us have to learn along the way. And until we learn them, we're not going to necessarily transform and transcend and get to that next level, because it's designed for us to learn before we go.
Right. Well, I know I took a lot out of it. Some of my notes, just to recap, were, number one, be careful. Don't let anger and fear turn you against each other, or turn you against the ones that you love and you care about. And be careful of that anger and fear, or the narrative that you're building for yourself, because that could allow you to spiral into what we call the drama triangle, which could create chemical addiction. And people don't even consciously realize that they're constantly seeking significance to rebuild that case, because that's what's known for them, right? And that's how they get it, instead of letting go of that and going into the unknown. I wrote down that I want to make a shirt, magic is in the unknown, it's time to prove it. And I think that, the biggest thing is, like, just be careful of our thoughts or things. Mitch gave you a couple things that he does when he realizes his thoughts are drifting, but thoughts are things. And so fear is a thought, fear is a thing, therefore, but since it's a thought, you can shift it, you can work with it, you can turn it into a strength or a power. So do something that scares you every day to realize that you can overcome to become. But there's nothing static. There's no guarantees in life except taxes and death, as my dad used to always say. But But I loved it when you said, I always say judgment, right? Like I always tell people, I have to remember to take off my black robe. Number one thing that all of us want to do, I think unconsciously, is judge others, right? And sometimes that judgment comes from a projection of ourselves. Other times it comes from either an insecurity or other things that we don't even know we're seeking. And so I remind myself all the time, don't put on your black robe, Brian, right? Is that unless you walk through someone else's shoes, you don't know what they're going through. And something that I think is happening more and more today, you said this, and that is labeling and diagnosing others. And people feel like if they read this book, they're all of a sudden an expert, and they have the authority to label or diagnose. I think that any tools that you get, the number one person you should work on is yourself. This is just the things I've taken away from our conversation. And then remember, don't act out of self-righteousness, or don't take on as you're the moral authority. We all have something to learn. We're all humans. We're all going to make mistakes. And there is no logic or rationale or probably love in self-righteousness, right? Those are just things that I wrote down, that I wanted to get out of my system. So anyway, appreciate it.
Appreciate you.